and welcome to Now is the Time. I'm Mary Crowley. You know, there's such a new development in Hollywood, and I've got someone in the studio with me today that's actually been working as a writer in Hollywood for over 35 years. He's worked on some major movies such as Avatar and True Lies and different types of movies, but now I believe there's a new renaissance in Hollywood that we're on the cutting edge of things that are happening in such a new and inspiring way. Movies such as Son of God, God's Not Dead, and Heaven is for Real have done a very tremendous job over the last 6 months, and it's making Hollywood executives take notice that something indeed is happening in Hollywood. Welcome to the program, Randy.
Hi.
Now, just for the people that are viewing, how long have you been writing in Hollywood?
I've been writing about 40 years, but actually writing things that get made about 30 years.
Okay, and what are some of the projects you worked on in the past?
True Lies, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, with James Cameron, and about 20 or 30 genre thrillers, action-adventure films, cop thriller movies, serial killer movies, things like that.
But there came a point that you got tired of writing those type of stories and you wanted to write something more inspirational. And you actually started working on a C.S. Lewis adaptation of Out of the Silent Planet.
Yeah, I was sort of disconnected from God and just going about my business writing screenplays. But I got kind of soul sick writing movie after movie where violence was the solution to the conflict in the story. I think it's too late in the world for mass media to depict violent solutions to whatever human conflicts are happening, that we need to have a better way. And I was raised a Catholic. I was a Catholic altar boy for a brief period of time, but then I fell out of my relationship with God. But around this time, I started praying again because I was asking God to give me more inspirational films, projects that were going to have a beneficial impact on human beings watching the movies, that it would be films that would make people feel good to be human, feel they were worthy of a God's love. And most of the films I've been writing didn't do that. They did almost the opposite unintentionally. So I decided to do that, recognizing that making this change would cost me, because the kind of movies that do well internationally are films of revenge, films of violent conflict resolution. So violence seems to travel in every culture, unfortunately. So I knew I would be taking a financial hit to do that, but I felt that I couldn't do these other films anyway. And I had no other prospects, so I prayed and I asked for these kinds of projects to come to me. The very next day, I got 5 separate phone calls from producers offering me inspirational projects. And the one that I took, the first one I took, was adapting C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet, which is the first in a trilogy of space adventures that C.S. Lewis wrote before he wrote the Narnia trilogy. And I had to go to Ireland and argue with C.S. Lewis's stepson, who had control of the rights, to change certain things from the book because they needed to be updated. And in my discussions with him and his wife about the theology behind the book, it started to open my heart, and it led me to reestablish my relationship with Jesus. And that led me to more inspirational projects, which led me eventually to write the Lonnie Frisbee story for you as producer. And this is an interesting time in Hollywood where things have been changing, the way projects are chosen, what projects are chosen to be made and financed in Hollywood. There's fewer and fewer of them each and every year. They're bigger and bigger budgets. And it's because the foreign market is now driving the profits of every film Hollywood makes. It used to be a very small part of the profits. Now it's the major part of the profits. So it's become a global market for Hollywood, as it never has been before. So they can only make movies that they believe in their minds will be marketable to an audience of multiple cultures. And because of that, you're seeing a lack of inspirational and faith-based movies, family-oriented dramas, because they don't think they'll travel very well in foreign. There are exceptions to that rules, and Mary, you mentioned them. Those 3 films are examples of movies that are breaking the rules and are doing well all over the world. So this is the worst and the best of times, like Charles Dickens in A Tale of Two Cities, the worst and the best of times to do faith-based, inspirational stories that model positive human behavior, compassion, love. It's harder to do it now, but it's also easier because some of these films are becoming successful and Hollywood's beginning to warm up to them now.
Well, and there's those of you watching today, I wanted to do this program with Randy because I want to inspire many of you that are watching that maybe you want to write a script or you want to produce a movie and you've got this thing inside of you that you want to do things in the kingdom. You want to do it with projects that are creative. I want to encourage you, and the reason I brought Randy in is to inspire you that everything that you ever see on the big screen all started with one idea, one thought. In fact, when I've hired Randy to write, he's already written the script for the movie that we're working on. But all I can tell you is don't quit believing, keep moving forward in what you're called to do in your position. Because the average movie, Randy, in Hollywood, I've heard it takes about 12 to 13 years to actually come into production. Is that true according to what you know?
Generally speaking, that's always been true, even back in the days when the studios' systems were in place and they were much more efficient about how they developed and produced and released movies. But it's gotten worse lately. I would say it's gone up to almost 15 years in some projects. So you really need to have a strong driving need to make the film. And sometimes it's shorter than that. It doesn't always have to be that way. Some films like Forrest Gump with Tom Hanks, which is a good example of an inspirational film that doesn't have to be overly religious, was an Academy Award-winning film, Best Picture that year, Best Screenplay, Best Actor. That particular movie took 11 years to be developed to the script to the point where everybody thought they should make the movie. And what was the difference between the first drafts and the last draft was that there was more upbeat, inspirational scenes in the movie. The film was more powerful emotionally because they had rewritten and rewritten it to the point where it went way beyond the book it was based on and was actually much better than the book that it was based on, a rare occurrence. And it caught the imagination of the world, made enormous amounts of money, and was a highly critically successful film, and audiences loved it for the most part. So, but the way I think about it is, back in Jesus' day when he walked the Holy Lands and preached his gospel, he was trying to spread the good news that there was salvation through him. And he was doing it the only way that was technologically feasible then, where people were receiving information, which is to actually go up to people and one-on-one preach to them or give signs and wonders and get their attention and then give them the message. And the message spread virally from person to person. We now live in a technological age where media can do this job much more efficiently, almost immediately. The word can be spread all over the world. Now, what kind of word do you want to spread? Do you want to spread the word of dissension, of conflict, of intolerance, of a hate? Or do you want to spread messages of love and compassion and coming together of the human race in a world that can be heaven on earth? We can make that happen. Well, and also spread the news that there is salvation through Jesus Christ. And to do that, to be like disciples of Christ and spread the word, we can become screenwriters, producers, directors, actors, and we can take the media in hand and start spreading these messages in the media, the mass media, so that people all over the world can hear the gospel simultaneously, and there can be this incredible wave of revelation that overtakes people on this planet at the same time. That can happen in the current Hollywood system, because when they make movies, they sometimes now release movies like, I think the last time they did this, Marvel's The Avengers film, which came out about a year and a half ago, was released simultaneously in almost every country on the earth, which means that over 1 billion people saw it almost in the same week, if not in the same couple of days. And that becomes a communal experience in a very powerful way. So that's why I think it's very important for you, if you have any dreams at all of becoming a filmmaker, a film writer, you have to pay attention to what's your vision, what's the message you're going to be conveying, because it's a hard job to get something made now probably as hard as it's ever been, if not more hard, more difficult to get these films produced and released. So if you're going to spend years of your life doing it, you should be spending that time on something you believe in deeply. So that's why I'm here.
Well, and two, what I wanted to say is that, you know, Randy met actually the director James Cameron like 40 years ago, and by a chance meeting in a community college scenario in Southern California. Now, when you met Jim Cameron, I mean, he was what, about 19 years old back then? You're a few years older than him.
I think he was probably 18 or 19, yes.
Okay, so he was actually tried to pick up your girlfriend in a psychology class, and why don't you tell us the story of how you met James Cameron?
I was going to a community college to study acting because as a writer, or a future writer, I wanted to understand what actors needed in their screenplays and in their scripts to be able to do the role properly. What kind of motivation were they looking for? So I was taking this acting class while my girlfriend was taking a psychology class in the same college, same campus. And James Cameron told me later that he took psychology class because all the cutest girls take psychology. And one of the cutest girls sitting in that room at the time was my girlfriend, so he went over to sit down and talk to her. And after she listened to him talking for a while, she realized he was pretty smart and that he had very similar interests to mine, which were science fiction, mythology, film. And so she said, you got to meet my boyfriend. So she took me out to meet when we met after class and introduced him to me and me to him. And we started talking, and almost immediately we realized we were on the same page. And it was like, you know, finding your brother, your long-lost brother.
So, but at this point, he basically was a truck driver, just working for some local, you know, trucking company, and he wanted to be a novelist.
He was actually working for the school district, the local school district in a small town we lived in at the time, and but dreaming of bigger things, of course. And he was always very smart in everything he did, even as a young boy. He always had very ambitious projects he would be doing. He was doing really ambitious Super 8 movies and sculpting and painting, even at a very young age. He was always very creative. And he had written a novel, the first 5 chapters of a novel called Necropolis, that I read, and I thought, wow, this is really maturely written for a guy who's your age. This is really well written. You have a great ability to write and convey images on the page. I think you'd actually be better as a screenwriter and maybe a director, because you can use all of your skills as an artist, as a sculptor, as a painter, dance, choreography, photography. All of those elements are in motion picture. So I told him, why don't you consider being a film director? He said, I don't know how to do that. And I said, well, first of all, we got to write a screenplay that you can attach yourself to as a director, and then they have to hire you if they want the screenplay. You direct your first movie. If it's any good, you'll have a career. So he thought about that, and he said, okay, let's do something. So we started collaborating on various projects, some of which we never completed because they became too ambitious for our resources at the time. And eventually we convinced a consortium of dentists looking for something to invest in at the end of the year to finance a short film that was made from a scene from a screenplay we were writing, a science fiction screenplay. And they actually paid us for the screenplay as well. And that was our first working job as writers and filmmakers. We made this short film, and that got us a job as special effects technicians at New World Pictures, a low-budget film company run by Roger Corman back in the early 80s. We worked on 3 films, and James Cameron became not only an effects guy, but an art director, and he came to the attention of a producer who wanted to make a sequel to Piranha, and he asked Roger Corman, who had produced the original film, what director do you have, what guy do you have around here who could be a good director who I could hire cheap? And he recommended James Cameron, and he directed that film, but that film didn't progress his career. It wasn't good enough, not because of James Cameron, but because of the producer he was working with, limiting him. So he sat down on my dining room table and asked me, well, what kind of I got to do some kind of screenplay I can attach myself to that is so successful that everyone in town wants to make it so that I can propel my career. So we sat down and looked at all these issues of trade magazines, movie magazines, what films had been successful for the last 10 years in the top 5 films. And they are all either science fiction or fantasy. And so we made a menu list of the elements in all those movies, and then coalesced that menu list down to a shorter list. And then he said, okay, this is all the things we have to have in the screenplay. And he said, this makes me think of an idea. And he had an experience while he was in Italy doing post-production on the first film he directed of a accident on the freeway, and he was driving by in his dream, and he saw a man who was on fire climbing out of the wrecked car. And he pulled over to help the guy in the dream. And as he approached him, his flesh burned away and revealed a chrome skeleton underneath. And he said, that was such a vivid image to me that it stuck in my head. And I said, well, one of the things we learned from our little menu list is that you have to have a really strong villain, an unstoppable villain, the boogeyman who can't be stopped. And he said, well, what if the boogeyman is a robot who is a killer robot sent to kill somebody, assassinate somebody? And I said, that's a great idea, but they don't have that technology now. How would we justify that? And he said, what if it comes from the future? And that's how Terminator was born. And
well, and so what we're trying to say to you, those of you watching is, I'm trying to articulate and getting questions from Randy, answers from Randy, is the fact that these things, it just was a suddenly when he met Jim Cameron. Little did he know down the road that Avatar and Titanic would be two of the top grossing movies of all time, Titanic winning 11 Academy Awards and Avatar being seen by over 1 billion people on the planet. And now in the sequels of 2, 3, and 4 that are getting ready to go into production. But this is the thing. You don't know, right, Rainey, what's going to be successful and what's not going to be successful. You have to do it from your gut and what God is trying to tell you to do. And I know what he's given me to do. And I know after 8 years, 4 writers, that God brought me the right writer through you.
Thanks. There are people in Hollywood, in the film industry, here and all over the world, who believe you can dictate a successful film ahead of time. We did it with Terminator. We didn't know it was going to be that successful, but we thought this would at least make the film, people want to buy the screenplay and hire Jim Cameron to direct it. We didn't think it would be so successful, but we thought it would have elements of success. But the truth is, what really drives a movie is a combination of elements so complicated you can't really map it out. And when you're writing the screenplay, you get inspirations, things that come to you. And in the case of writing the Lonnie script with you, we were getting inspirations all over the place that were coming from outside of ourselves, that were, we believe, downloads from God, wanting us to write it a certain way. And because of that, those are the kind of things that you can't really plan out. I mean, we mapped out the basic story of Lonnie, which was based on a true life. So it was easy to map that out. But then what we wanted to do with it, how we wanted to creatively change it, what we wanted it to say, we had to think up and evolve as we wrote it. So if you have an idea for a movie, it may change while you're writing it. But the important thing is to have the idea in the first place. So you have a roadmap.
Well, we only have we only have a few minutes left, Randy. Why don't you tell the people just, they want to be a writer, they want to be a producer, they want to be an actress, they want to be something in Hollywood or in this new media around the globe. What's just a minute answer, what would you say to them as advice?
Do the work. What I mean by that is it doesn't come easy for most people. It isn't something that's going to be handed to you. You're going to have to win it by being really good. And how you get really good is you do the work. You write, you study, you research, you watch other movies, you use your brain, you use your common sense, and you write something, you create something that is so good people desperately want it. And then you can develop your career from there. And but most people think this is going to be easy, or that it's a natural talent that's going to be like water finding its own level. No, it's like anything else. When you do it well, it takes some time and energy and effort and commitment. That's why I say you should love the message you're trying to convey, because you're going to be spending a long time, even in the best case scenarios, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy fighting the naysayers, the people that say, no, that's not going to work, we don't really care about it. So you got to follow your vision. You got to be a firebrand for your vision, and you got to do the work.
Well, when Jim wrote Titanic, and that was how long, 3 hours and 15 minutes?
The finished film was 3 hours and 14 minutes, yeah.
Did Jim ever have any idea that he'd win 11 Academy Awards for that?
No, and there's a way that marketing people separate the audiences into quadrants. and they can determine ahead of time, they believe, whether the film's going to be successful or not. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. The beauty of this business is that there is serendipity, there is inspiration, there is surprises. But what he thought about Titanic, the marketing people were telling him, is you've made a chick flick. That's only one quadrant. It's not the biggest quadrant. It's not the one that makes the most money. But what it turned out was that Titanic became a 5-quadrant movie. It appealed to all the quadrants, older people, younger people. It didn't matter what their ethnicity was. It had such universal, powerful emotions in it that everybody in every culture could understand it, appreciate it, and love it. So that's one of the reasons why it became really successful.
Well, listen, thanks for coming on the program, Randy. Thanks for watching. Now is the time. You know, one thing I just heard the Lord speak to me right now is to tell you, follow your heart. If you have a passion that God has given you, I know when God told me to start getting involved in the media, I produced over 400 television programs around the world, and I just had, like, I call them holy hunches. I just started taking classes, just like you heard Randy say earlier. I started taking classes in editing, in directing, in a local community college. I spent 4 years learning everything I could learn about the movie business and producing. And actually, God was the one who came to me and told me to do the movie that I'm working on. It's actually been over 8 years now. Now, was it an easy thing? Was it something that happened quick and fast? No. Did I think it was going to take as long as it did to get to where I am at today? No. But one thing I will never do is I will never quit. And one thing that you have to learn, if it's a God-given talent that He's given you, it is something you truly desire in your heart. As long as you don't stop, you will reap and you will become successful. And sometimes, you know, your road will take a little bit of a turn. Sometimes there'll be a roadblock and you'll have to go down a different road. But if you always keep asking God and keep on believing and keep on moving and keep on working, you will eventually get to where you're supposed to be, as long as you don't quit.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
I would like to say that going back to what we started to talk about in the beginning, is that I consider myself a disciple of Christ. And that's the reason why you don't stop, because the disciples didn't stop, even unto death. They still trumpeted the message, the good news, the gospel of salvation. And to me, if I can do that directly or indirectly through mass media, then my whole life is justified. I can die happily. So I hope that all the other people watching the show who have any talent or inspiration or desire to become a filmmaker take the responsibility of being a filmmaker to heart and do the work, do the training, do the research, and then come up with a message that is inspirational and truly helps the human race on its road toward perfection.
Well, thanks, Randy, and thanks for watching. Now is the time. Now is the time for you to find your purpose and destiny in the kingdom, for this is the hour. I believe that the greatest move of God that the world has ever seen is right on the horizon. Hope to see you next week.